can hear me. Hello. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I live and work, which are the Boonwurrung people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also the elders of other communities who may be joining us online today. My name's Joanna Bosse and I'm curator of Bayside Gallery, which is located in the Brighton Town Hall here in Melbourne. We're joined today by two of the artists whose works feature in our current exhibition Greenworld, Wona Bae and Charlie Lawler. Greenworld brings together painting, photography, collage and sculptural works by contemporary Australian artists that provide moments of reflection on nature as a restorative force in our lives. And I think really during this time of intense interiority, thanks to the coronavirus pandemic, time spent in the natural world has never felt more precious and more necessary. Greenworld investigates that relationship between an individual and their surroundings and the role that nature plays in human consciousness. A wonderful feature of the exhibition is the beautiful suspended installation titled Resonance by Wona Bae and Charlie Lawler, who collaborate under the name of Loose Leaf. Charlie and Wona, thank you for joining us today. And thanks so much for sharing your practice with us and discussion about your work. And thanks also for coming to us from Melbourne, which is in the extended lockdown. So solidarity to you both. I'd just like to start by asking you to give us an overview of your practice, which ranges really from small-scale artist-initiated sort of intervention projects right through to large-scale commissions that you've done in Australia and overseas, and recently a major solo exhibition at a museum. So I'll throw to you to introduce yourselves and tell us more. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Charlie Lawler.
I'm Wona Bae.
So we have a collaborative practice. We've been doing that for about 8 years now. Our work mainly focuses on sculpture and installation-based work. Then we also make sort of two-dimensional relief style work, permanent works, and we do documentation of our work too. Where to start?
Our works are sometimes like site-specific and explore the role of nature and the built environment together.
I think our work's quite often material-driven. So we work with natural materials mainly, and we like to work with one material over a longer period of time. So we develop a relationship with that material, and then sort of let that drive the process of how we create our larger works and sculptural and installation works. Yeah.
And I think you've got some images maybe to run through, because I think, such an important part of your work is obviously, the majesty of the end product. And so, maybe we'll share those now, and then maybe talk a little bit more detail about materials and practice as we go through.
Cool. Okay, bear with me. This is technology. Okay. So that is. So you can see that okay? That's. This work is from our most recent exhibition at Heide Museum of Modern Art. For this work, we actually we were commissioned by Leslie Harding, the artistic director of Heide, to create a series of works in an exhibition that responded to the Heide 2. It's a building designed by Melbourne modernist. We can this one. So this work is called Rumble, and it's in the they call this area, it's called the Conversation Pit at Heidi 2. And this is probably the most iconic room within the building in a way. So we wanted to create a work which sort of celebrated the architecture while also celebrating the artwork. It was a constant balance between well, it was this constant sort of balance between finding the right balance between architecture and artwork. And as you'll see as we sort of go through the images, how we use different different sort of spaces.
Next. Oh, that was
yeah.
Yeah, those clean lines of Heidi 2 really are such a wonderful backdrop for the natural materials that, you know, comprise your work. I love that contrast, you know, it's really effective.
Yeah, this was it was as much an exercise in restraint as anything else, like working in there, because the building itself is so unique and beautiful and clean, and we wanted to really showcase that and hero that as well. You know, without anything in that building, it's a work of art.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had 7 months working on this project, where the museum's closed on Mondays. So on Mondays, we're able to get access and go and create work in there. And through that process, we created quite a lot of installations in the end. How many do you think?
I don't know, but 3 times maybe more than what we show.
So potentially, I think we probably created about 20 or so installations over time, and some we used in the actual final exhibition. Others we documented and presented as photographic works in the exhibition, and others only we ever saw ourselves.
And was that a rare experience, having the venue to work with over such a long period of time? Because, you know, a lot of your site specific work is kind of, you're in and out fairly quickly. So was that unusual, and did that change the way that you worked? Did it slow things down?
I think it probably sped things up in a way. It was a different way to work. Definitely it was unique to have access for so long. Normally we don't have as much access, and we work with scale models of a space first. So we'll create scale models of our work before actually getting into the space. And then we will, depending how big the work is, we create sections of it in the studio and sort of test out how it's going to feel. So I think you'll see with this work here, it's called Proximity. This was in a 19th century former church hall. And this is, it's called Establishment Studios. And we worked with the owner of this space, Carly Spooner, on a project with Roan last year. And that was a collaborative project we did in a mansion in the Dandenong Ranges. But yeah, this is her space. And when she showed us this, we knew instantly we wanted to create something in there. So for that one, we created it 3 or 4 times in the studio before we actually made it in the space. And we only had a short time to make it documented in that space. So.
Was it difficult to get the scale right, working, you know, outside the space? Or, I guess I'm interested to know how much you sort of plotted out beforehand, or how much is an intuitive thing as you're going, you know, how much it evolves during the time that you're actually installing.
With that one, we're able to build a life-size sort of scale model in our studio, or scale version in our studio. We're quite lucky to have a big studio. We need it for our work. So that's about 12 meters long, and I think anything up to about 10 or 12 meters, we can actually produce life-size versions in our studio. This is our studio. You can see. Oh, you can't see it now. It's on shit. See it in a minute. But yeah, we're able to create those bigger works, or those sort of size works in the studio. but we get pretty good at reading spaces, especially when we're responding to that space. Like we visited quite a few times before, and we're able to be in that space and get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Project.
Yeah. Maybe we'll go. Yeah. So this is proximity. This piece we wanted to create sort of a playfulness and movement to this piece. So it's sort of, it starts like moving out from the center, but but we wanted to create a dialogue with the architecture where it actually the columns started to sort of prevent the piece from moving forward and split it. And
I always feel like it's, you know, the architecture's been consumed by the piece, so it's kind of growing and, you know, cannibalizing it in a way, and fight, you know, nature fighting back. You know, we've talked about this idea of nature having agency, and yeah, I think that's articulated really beautifully, especially with that class, you know, the faux classical, and you know, all the symbolism of that, and then you've got you know, that growth that kind of is overtaking it at small points. It's really poetic. Yeah,
and I think that came through in the work we did at Heidi as well, like with the pieces moving through the space. We wanted to create this sense of nature moving through a space. And in the one in Heidi, for example, we actually worked with sound artist Martin Kay, and he created a soundscape for that piece, which sort of was embedded in the artwork. And the sort of the way we imagined the piece was, it was almost like a glacial kind of form moving through the architecture. And from there, Martin sort of interpreted and went and ran with that, and he was able to record sounds from nature and then sort of start to present them in like a glacial kind of form. So he actually he froze microphones in ice and had the sound of ice cracking through the space. And
oh wow,
he recorded the sound of the wind moving through trees, but recorded it through contact mics on the roots of the trees. So you start to get this I don't know how to describe it. It's a unique sound. I don't know how to describe it, but but he actually, in the Heidi show, he took that a step further and used transducers on the floor of the building, which I'll go back to the piece. Yeah, it was in this piece, Rumble. So in the floor of the conversation pit, he used transducers and actually ran the sound through the building. So the piece had an extra layer of connection with the building. Yeah, which was really quite interesting, and particularly interesting when you were in the room below that one, because you got a very intense sound of that piece as if it was moving above you. But
it's interesting too, because that floor is you know, it's traditionally got that squeak. It's known as also known as the squeaky floor. Conversation pit. So it's always a really unnerving feeling when you are underneath that room at Heidi and somebody walks across it, because it's really dramatic sound. So that's kind of a nice tie-in. Clever.
Yeah, I think the sounds of the squeaks played into the track perfectly, actually. Yeah. I guess we'll go to next work. Jumping through.
Primitive Matter.
Yeah, this is a show called Primitive Matter, which we did at Backwards Gallery in
last year,
2019. Yeah, start of 2019, and this show had a room where we showed two-dimensional works like reliefs, and a room where we had a sort of fully immersive installation piece, which again we worked with Martin Kay on the sound for that one. It's so these are some of the two-dimensional works, and these are very sort of textural works. And then this is the second room where
Oh wow!
It's a 6 meter wide hovering sort of ring of natural materials, and the piece you could go completely around this piece and inside and out. And for that piece, we worked with Martin to create the sound. We turned the sculpture into a speaker itself, so there was a multi-channel sound system, again using sounds like recorded in nature, which we turned the leaves into speakers. So as you walked around the piece, it made different sounds.
And I noticed too, with the piece at Bayside Gallery, you know, there's a real smell to the work as well. So when you're interacting with it, you get that, you know, really earthy kind of natural smell of grasses. I imagine this piece, or a lot of your pieces that aren't sort of, you know, treated for permanent display would retain that.
A lot of those pieces, the smell will hit you as soon as you enter the gallery and the space. This one in particular. So it's that extra kind of sensory experience with the piece.
And was there smoke? Did I see smoke in an earlier slide there?
Yes, that was fun.
That was dramatic effect in there. That was kind of sort of representative of sort of misty kind of stuff, but it came out. It felt quite dramatic in the end.
Bit of theatre. Good documentation. Beautiful. This
is a piece called Freeform. This one we created in Spain in a 15th century palace called Palacio de Oribe, I think. That's the right pronunciation
in Spanish.
But this piece we actually we visited the site several months before we created the piece, and we observed different sort of plants that were in the patios of Cordoba in this part of Spain, and we identified this plant, Asparagus Fern, as being one that appeared time and time again, and that people seem to have an affinity with in that city, in that area. So we're able to sort of locally source this material en masse, and this piece uses 40,000 individual pieces of this material. It's called Asparagus Fern.
And is that very fresh? It looks very green.
Yeah,
a lot of your other work.
It's very fresh, but this piece is actually designed to sort of show all stages of the life of the plant. So it over time it slowly fades to a sort of a lighter green and a yellowy color, and then the leaves start to drop off. The tiny little leaves start to drop off and reveal the sort of true form of the asparagus' skeletal kind of form, which is really,
it's really beautiful.
Beautiful.
How long was this piece on display for?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah.
So that transformation happens in a fairly rapid.
I reckon I could have done with another week. I reckon, to get the full kind of effect.
I think
but
a month.
I reckon a month.
Yeah.
So, but there was part of a festival that went for just over 2 weeks. So so it started to have that effect by the end. Unfortunately, we didn't even get to see the end. We had to fly back to Australia before it even opened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We were there 5 days. Just work.
Yeah, that's the other thing that you guys you have done a lot of international travel with your practice, and sadly, you know, this year you've had to delay a lot of that. A lot of those opportunities you haven't been able to realise them this year. But I think it's really interesting that you know, proactively seek, you know, opportunities for international festivals and for working with people. You know, I think, you know, it shows a certain you know, ambition, obviously, with your practice to find those really unique sites that you can respond to. And you know, looking at the images of your work, the site is so important. You know, the aesthetics of the site and the way that the work interacts with it. Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you about. You know, given that you're sort of working in these public spaces, and, you know, working in public spaces, you know, there's a lot of technical and logistical issues that are brought to bear. So I was interested to know whether, you know, what sort of drives you primarily? Is it the aesthetic, the end result, or, you know, is it the impact that it has on the audience, you know, that aha moment that when people first see it in the space, or is it collaborating with others, you know, throughout the process? I was kind of interested, yeah, to maybe unpack that a little bit, because obviously you need to make a decision at one point which way you're going to what you're going to prioritize, you know.
Yeah.
I think every practice is important.
Yeah.
Nothing like a priority.
Yeah, it is probably a mixture of all of the
Everything,
above. But I guess we have the site-specific work, and then the more gallery-based white box gallery, or the one you saw in Backwards Gallery, the primitive matter one.
Yeah.
I think the ones which are more site-specific, I guess the site is a very big consideration in that, and the architecture and how that leads the project. I think when it's less about site specific, then you can sort of start to consider other bits first. I think it's probably about the we like our work to be approachable and interactive for the audience. So it's about being able to be viewed and experienced from all angles, and it's kind of, I guess that takes its cue from how we observe nature. Like when you're in the natural world, or in the forest, for example, the view, like walking along a path in the forest, the way you observe the natural world around you changes with every single footstep, and every angle you can experience and see a different thing. And both Wona and I marvel at this constantly, and how you can walk past the same thing day after day and notice a different thing every single time. So I think we like to sort of approach our sculptural and installation work like that. So like it takes often, like I think with the process of making it in the studio as well, we're able to sort of approach it from those different angles day after day, and see how it works and change it as we see fit.
Resonance, the piece in Greenworld, is such a great example of that, because depending where you stand, it looks like a completely different object. You know, it's circular from one perspective, it's, you know, a cylinder from another, it's flat from another angle. You know, if you're looking at it straight on, it's kind of got this flatness that then starts to, you know, have an optical effect. You know, so that is I think that's a really beautiful example of, I guess, the, you know, the care and the specificity that you bring to bear on the visitor experience.
Yeah, I think Resonance probably does that most overtly out of all pieces. It's driven less by, it's not a site specific work. It's driven more by, like, so it's the driver, the work is the driver, and because of that, we're able to sort of position it front and center in the room, and you're able to experience the work from all those different angles and different perspectives.
Yeah. And it's quite contained too, like it doesn't, I mean, your work is, I think, you know, there's an objecthood to the sculpture that's not dependent. It relates to the site, but it's not dependent on the site. You know, it's got its own identity, which I think, you know, only serves to make that contrast of where it's situated even greater and more sort of, you know, beautiful in a way, or sublime, you know, that sort of shock of contrast. And that notion of the sublime, I think, works really well. Yeah. Have you got more to show, Charlie?
I think we're going to show one more project.
Okay.
This is called the Halo series, and this is a project. This is a sort of artist-driven project which we started a few years ago in Japan when we were doing an exhibition there. It came about actually because the gallery we were working in was so small that we started working on the street outside, and
Japan.
Through that, we started having sort of really interesting interactions with the people as they pass by, and we're lucky enough to have a translator with us, so we actually understood what questions were being asked, and we're able to talk with people, which was nice. But this sort of, through that, we kind of came up with this idea to create a work which was sort of an intervention within the urban landscape, and it sort of present the natural world as sort of a piece you can stumble across. We wanted it to be almost, I guess, fantasy-like in a way, like where you wonder how it is held up and how it is sort of floating in that space, like real world Photoshop in a way. That's the kind of feeling. But we didn't want to do it's not about digital manipulation or anything like this. So it's very much about creating that in the real world. So this was the first one we actually created. And since, we returned to Japan the next year and created this during the Cherry Blossom Festival over there. So this piece, again in Tokyo, but that was a really nice one. Like this piece was up for, we made 2 different works, and they're up anywhere from sort of 10 minutes to 2 hours, and we kind of just moved around as we did them. And these works are, at the beginning they were less about, they weren't planned works, they were just responding to a space directly. So we didn't ask for permission to put them up. They're done a bit guerrilla style, I guess. And this piece was up, and then the police would come along and would quickly take it down and then move it to another location. But it was just nice to, like, you don't often get that from an artwork, like to see that sort of immediate interaction with the audience, and that's also a nice sort of part of this project.
Yeah, I imagine the sort of, I mean, they look so magical in the images, but I imagine that in the flesh people would have really had that, you know, that response to them as well, that there's kind of like this apparition, you know, this portal into another world that appears, you know, out of nowhere, which just will bring joy into people's lives in these urban environments. It's very, you know, I think at the core of what drives you as well is privileging, you know, that experience with nature within the built environment. And something that we touched on before, which I might get you to expand on further, is this idea of agency, you know, that nature does have agency, even though we are so disrespectful of it in so many ways, particularly in our urban environments, and in the current era. And a great quote that describes your work is that you present the natural world as active and central in an era of polarization, inequality, inaction, and apathy. You know, which it sounds pretty negative, but you know, could you talk a little bit about I guess how you try and address that within your practice, and this idea that nature is kind of fighting back or reasserting itself.
Yeah, we wanted to, I guess, like, you know, we find it funny that, like, as humans, we're part of the natural world as well as considering ourselves separate from it a lot of time, but our very existence relies on the fact that we're intricately connected to the environment. So it's kind of surprising in a way that we're potentially sort of actively causing our own extinction by a lot of our actions. But of course, I think nature has its own way of own very powerful voice and way of showing us that it's boss a lot of the time. But we wanted to, I guess, with our work, we had the opportunity to sort of take those natural elements and present them in a different context through the gallery or through our artwork. So I guess we wanted to give it to present it in a way that kind of gave it a voice in a different context, I guess. And
and I from my perspective, I think if you create something that activates, you know, an appreciation of beauty and poetry, and it sort of, you know, responds to the heart in people rather than their mind. You know, a lot of the discussions about climate change, it's, you know, it's very mind driven. It's and so people tend to shut off because it's just too much to kind of take on board. But I think when you create something that speaks to people spiritually, you know, like your work does, you create a beautiful, joyous experience for people. It can create this renewed appreciation and drive in people to actually do something. So I think from that perspective, it's the kind of respect that you're showing people, you're reminding people to have for nature is I think it's really powerful.
That would be a nice thought. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's funny actually. I when I first met Wona, I was working for the United Nations in Germany. It's what I like to call my last sort of real job. But I work for the climate change part of the UN, and I liked the work we're doing, but it was very frustrating sort of work to work with inside a system. So I think the idea of taking our work outside of that system and just being able to present it with our own voice was something that's coming through in our work now, probably.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any more of the halo?
There's a couple more here.
Yeah, beautiful.
This one's made with a canola plant, which we collected from just outside of the city. We collected that with Wona's dad in South Korea. This is in South Korea, and created this piece.
Just explain how is it actually installed, because it literally looks like it's superimposed. You know, but I know it's there, so suspended from 2 points.
Yeah, and it's we like to keep the mystery a little bit to how it's actually done.
It's not easy. It's really hard.
You make it look easy, but I know that it's not. It's very technically very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, we took it upon ourselves to block off the street and put witches' hats out at each end, and then bought ourselves some time to create that one. But we like to leave a little bit of mystery, but it is it's very much hanging there in the real world, unassisted. Assisted.
One more.
And then this one. This is in Australia. This is in Melbourne. This is with wattle, created like through seasonal. We often like to work with seasonal materials or materials that are in abundance at a certain time, essentially. But I guess it comes more from a point of this starting as an artist-led project. So cost is, of course, a thing a thing there. And we've since gone on to these works. We had the work commissioned in Melbourne last year and in Sydney the year before. So yeah, so it's since sort of there's starting to be some sort of, I guess, financial backing for this project. But what we also do is we document these interventions and then sell them as photographic prints, limited edition photographic prints, which sort of allows us to fund the project moving forward and so it makes it more sustainable.
Yeah. So just touching on materials then, you mentioned before that you kind of like to work within a set language. You get to know your materials and you kind of push the material to create the aesthetic that you like. So are you sort of constantly looking for new materials, or maybe talk a little bit about why you choose the materials that you do, and and how you sort of experiment within that language?
Yeah, I think in a way we're constantly looking, but also that we like to, it takes a while to work with the material, so we like to, I guess, develop a relationship with that material, and that takes time. The ones which you've seen a lot of photos of, the big sort of silvery green leaves, that's Robusta palm, that material, and that's one we've been working with now for about 4 years. And the further we work with it, the more we sort of delve deeper into it and use it in different ways and break it up. At the moment we're working with that as part of a composite material for another for almost like a concrete kind of structure. But we're also at the moment, for the last sort of maybe year or so, we've been working with charcoal quite a lot. That's sort of almost completely overtaken in the last sort of 12 months, and that's for new works which will be sort of starting probably to show later this year, and for bigger projects next year. But it takes time to sort of get to know the material before we sort of feel ready to present it in a way. But I guess in a way, for those sort of works, it is material driven. Like we fall in love with the texture of the material, how it captures the light, how it feels, how it smells, and then sort of start to break it down into different forms, and I guess isolate those parts of that material and then represent it. Yeah,
and with that faceted nature of a lot of the installations, with the the leaves that give that beautiful texture. You see that charcoal and fragments of charcoal can also give that beautiful fragmented and that fragmented shine on sheen. So it'll be really interesting to see what you produce for those. And I know you mentioned last time we spoke you've been working on small scale models of using charcoal to then try and upscale and work out how to actually work with the materials as a surface piece or as a whole unit. So it's really, for those of us listening, it's the rigor with which you approach the materials, I think, is really interesting. And the fact that you've been working now for 12 months with charcoal, yet haven't produced, an end product, I think just shows, how focused you are on developing that relationship and getting the outcome to work for the materials as well as for your aesthetics. And something that I love so much about your work is that combination of the organic and the integrity of the organic materials, but also the structure of design that you sort of impose on top of it, or alongside it, really, and how the two, there's this wonderful balance between kind of the wildness of the materials and the control of the design. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and maybe how you both work as a partnership within that kind of structure as well. Whether, yeah.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, if you know what I mean, because there is a real a real push and pull and a real balance between those two energies, and because you're a collaborative duo, I wonder whether there's also a push and pull between the energies of your personalities as well that maybe translates into the end result.
I think definitely there is. Yeah, we where to start?
I don't know.
I guess from a like with working with natural materials, I guess from showing the wildness and natural forms and structures in those materials. That's kind of, nature's already done a lot of the hard work in a way. Like the sort of forms you see in the natural world are so beautiful. So we, I think that's why we like to work with it over such a long time, because I think by simply like, unless you're going to do it better than what nature's done it, then don't try. And not saying that we even come close in a way, but we like to, I think as humans, we like to put our own stamp on something. And where it just feels right to work with the material in that way. But in terms of, I think we both bring different things to the work at different points. It's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah, but somehow it's working together. Like our eyes, like we agree both, like a final artwork, like result. Our eyes is very similar. I don't know. We both agree at the end, and then I think
before that we don't agree.
Yeah, yes.
To get to that point, there's a lot of not agreeing.
Lots of discussions and arguing, but I think and we both think, this is it. Yeah, we agree. So that's how we work. I don't know. It's very hard to describe.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's intuitive, and it's you obviously have your own independent processes as well, and then you come together to progress things.
I think that as like when we start to work on a new project or new artwork, we often have we come together and discuss how we want to produce the work, and then we often have a long period of sort of experimenting on our own, and then come back and present to each other, and then go away and make more, and then come back and present to each other.
Yeah.
And kind of get to a point where we're starting to feel okay. Then we normally have a big fight, and then after that, it kind of starts to fall into place. But that's generally.
Sounds like a nice, respectful and exciting artistic process where you've got that push and pull, which produces good results. We are we're very close to 3 o'clock. It's 2:45. So I'd just like to invite anyone who has questions to please send them through on the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we're also live on Facebook. So if anyone has anything on Facebook, my colleague Helen can send those through to us as well. There's a couple that have come through. Joe wanted to know, when you go to see the space first and then design your ideas and pre-build, do you create in the space directly after some initial concepts and gathering materials? So I guess we kind of touched on that in the terms of, doing a bit of both, visiting the site and using a scale model to kind of workshop ideas about scale and placement.
It really depends on the parameters of that space or the place. So, like for example, during COVID times, we've had to rely on making models much more, and making stuff outside of a space. Because I mean, if you're in Melbourne, we've been in lockdown for I don't know how long now. It feels like a while.
long time.
3 months. Yeah, long
Yes.
time. Yes.
So we've had to rely on that process more and hone our skills, and even starting to like delve into experimenting with sort of digital modeling of stuff, I guess, like making like computer-based models, and we're not good at that.
Because you do, I imagine you take a lot of photographs when you visit the site, you know, to remind, you know, give yourself that visual memory of what's there, and so yeah, that I imagine that's a whole other creative process if you're going to do digital modeling. That's yeah. that would be intense. And Carmen has asked, what is the name of the large silvery palm leaf that you use?
That's called Robusta palm.
Robusta
palm, yeah.
And you also, that's not its nat. You also kind of shape that form too, don't you? You cut it into shapes.
Yeah, so we use that in a few different ways, like that we sort of break down the leaf and then use certain bits for some sculptures and other bits for others. But that's, I guess, the best example of it I can give it. You know, if you've ever been to Los Angeles and you've seen the palm trees on the sides of the road, it's the same palm leaf as you'll see on those trees.
Okay. Yeah. Because it is robust. It's obviously you know, it's going to decay over time, but and Kathy actually asked if you treat it, or, you know, do you view your works as ephemeral, or, you know, I know you do some permanent installations, so I guess within working with that material, there's a range of ways that you approach it depending on what
depending on how it's finally going to be seen and used. If it's an ephemeral work, then we don't need to do as much treatment on it. If it's a permanent work, we do archival treatments on it to make it last a long time. And
and Carmen, who is a floral designer in Mexico, hello Carmen, she asked again if you reuse the products once the installation's finished, which, so you recycle, you sort of have a pool of materials that you call on.
It depends on when projects are. Like sometimes we can reuse, but quite often timings of projects don't allow us to do that, because to treat a material archivally is quite a time-consuming and expensive process. So if we're only doing exhibitions every 6 months, we can't, like, it's not sort of practical to reuse that product or that material in 6 months. It's
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And Joe asks, how do you guys describe your work? You know, what sort of terminology do you use? She said that she sees it as a form of amazing sculptural floristry writ large. But yeah, I mean, what's the terminology you use? Installation? How do you relate to that idea of floristry?
Different works we will describe in different ways. I guess we've got our installation-based works, which they're like, generally we have installation-based works, we have sort of permanent sculptural works, and then we have two-dimensional relief style permanent works as well, which we create, and then we have the documentation of our work.
I'm just seeing whether there's any other questions coming through. Not at the moment, but I've sort of got a final question I can ask while we're waiting. And I was really interested to learn, Wona, that you grew up on a flower farm in Korea. That sounds really you know, beautiful upbringing. And you know, you're Tasmanian, so you both had a lot of contact with nature, you know, as you were growing up, and I think obviously that comes across really strongly in your work. So I guess, you know, given that we're in Melbourne, we're in lockdown, I was interested to hear your thoughts on how city dwellers can keep that connection to nature alive. You know, I know I've been visiting our parks and, you know, a lot during my 1 hour of outside time. But yeah, just interested because you know, you're living in inner city Melbourne now, and yeah, how does that kind of feel, or how do you guys manage that?
Yeah,
we walk every day.
Yeah.
1 hour.
Yeah, that's what we have to say.
Yeah.
We walk one day every 1 hour
Every day, yes.
2 hours now.
2 hours now.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that connection you can keep in a way with observation. Like I think, like, you know, we often feel the seasons and seasonal change through observation. We traveled a few times around early August to a certain beech tree we know in North Fitzroy, which we know last year was the first one to get leaves on it.
Yeah.
So that was our sign that spring was coming. So
we keep checking.
We kept checking to see when the leaves started to pop out, and so that was
that's a sign of spring.
That was a sign of spring, yeah. So that happened around mid-August, and we were able to pinpoint the day.
Oh, that's really quite a beautiful ritual, actually. I really like that. It's kind of, it's getting back to the roots of, you know, nature being the guide of everything, rather than, you know, your calendar and, you know, the dates that are passing, and the first day of spring is the first day of, you know, this month or whatever. It's it's a really nice ritual for that we can all, you know, in the city we can all take note of that stuff. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of looking at it on that micro level, you can sort of appreciate it in a large
way.
Yeah.
Well, okay, here's a random question. Do you guys have a favorite book or something that you want to share?
Actually, we after this we go to a bookshop to pick up our new book. We ordered online.
But they're very different books.
So we want to try to read Norwegian Wood.
Oh yeah.
Murakami's book, and we want
fantastic.
But that's mixed with Calypso by David Sedaris. So they're two completely different books.
One's escape and one's escape and one's reality. Yeah. That kind of works. That's the contrast. Contrast is a bit of a theme that comes through strongly. Yeah. But look, thank you so much for spending the time with us, Wona and Charlie. Really, it's such a joy to have your work in the gallery, and I'm just really hoping that we'll be able to open soon so that people can see it. And I really look forward to all of the amazing things to come. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.